All right. I believe we are officially live. Let's make sure I am moving around and everyone can see me. Per usual, I'm just going to make sure everything is working before we get started. Just a moment here. Yep, looks like it's working on Facebook. All right. Perfect. All right, so it is 2 o'clock. Usually I give people just a couple minutes, or I go on live a couple minutes early just to give everybody a chance to kind of find their way in. But because it's right on 2 o'clock, I am going to go ahead and jump this party off. I know people will kind of be getting in where they fit in as we go forward. So let me start by saying welcome to our community conversations. My name is Jackie Jones. I am the community engagement manager at Create Birmingham, and I am also CEO of Win Degree Marketing. And if you have not been to a community conversation before, essentially what is happening is that we are having conversations about mostly small business, entrepreneurship, and really just as a community, the different things that affect what happens with us. And today we are talking about the entrepreneurial side, so to speak, of music. And I have a wonderful, wonderful, great friend with me who I am so proud to call friend, and his name is West Byrd. Hi, West.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm so glad that you said yes, because, you're a celebrity now, and that makes it a little harder to, get
Never.
you. Yeah. Well, if,
Never.
let us not have to go through the check the sheet here. You have a #1 Billboard song happening. We have the historic playing of at the races with NASCAR, which is pretty much kind of prompted all these changes in how we open up sports, which is very interesting. Do you feel very responsible for that? I've been meaning to ask you that.
Yeah. I don't know about responsible.
Yeah.
I think I had a hand in it.
Yeah, you did it. That's pretty funny.
I assisted.
You did. I mean, and you've always been a legend, so it's fine. First, I want to give you just the opportunity to kind of just introduce yourself, what you do. Just give everybody an understanding of what you do in your business.
Well, I am West Byrd. I'm originally from Alabama, and I'm a music director, producer, composer, and a musician. I play piano. I've been playing almost 30 years now. And I basically work for a bunch of artists who come to me and say, hey, I have these ideas, I have this, and I put their ideas and their shows together, put a great band around them, and then we go out and perform all over the world. And so that's part of my job of being a musical director.
You made that sound so simple.
It is pretty much.
I mean, I guess it is. Oh, we put shows together and we just travel the world doing them. Oh yeah, no, it's no biggie. It's just what I do.
Life.
So now I do have to, because our CEO at Create Birmingham, you have to say where in Alabama you're from. That's very important.
So I was born and raised in Selma, Alabama.
Shout out to Selma, Alabama. You have to say that out loud, or I'll get in trouble. Yeah. So, you've had a very long career in music. Have you ever had a non-music job?
The only thing I've ever done when I was in high school, I was an umpire, high school baseball umpire. Yeah. Other than that, no. I've never done anything else. I started playing piano professionally, I guess you would say, at church when I was about 11. So from there, I've always, kind of used that as a job, I guess you would say.
So what made you feel like, because, we work with a lot of creatives, in different industries, in different genres of art. What made you feel like music was a real possibility for a career? Like, what made you feel like that was even possible? Beyond, of course, let's talk about once you were old enough to be out of the house, right? Because when you're living with your parents and you're like playing at church, you kind of do whatever they'll take you to go do, right? But once you decided, okay, I'm an adult now and I'm going to go forward with my life as an adult with my dreams or career plans or whatever, what was there ever anything that just made you feel like, yes, this is possible? Or do you feel like you ever had any doubts that it was possible?
Funny story. I actually quit playing when I left home
Really?
for for a few years. And I was into medicine for a while. And I attended UAB. And I got an uncle who was a DJ in Montgomery. Well, in Selma, actually. His name is Carl, my mom's brother. He took me to a concert one time, and it was a Fred Hammond concert. And that was the first time I ever seen a production. Lights and smoke and musicians and this and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's different. I didn't know that possibility was afforded to me in music. So that was kind of the first time I ever looked at it and was like, okay, this could be something. And around the same time, I met this guy named Ben Massey, who had a recording studio. I'm maybe 18 or 19. I had never been to a recording studio, any of that stuff. But he invited me to the studio to play on some stuff, and that was my first time getting a taste of that side of music as well. So when you couple the production side and couple the recording side, when I got a taste of that, that's when the first time I really thought, okay, this is something that I can do, but not knowing necessarily how to do that, which was the challenging part, because in Selma, there wasn't a lot of productions, or actually no productions coming through, like I said. And I wasn't in the Atlanta scene or the New York scene or some of the bigger markets that are known for entertainment. So I just kind of started playing around the chitlin circuit in Birmingham when I was in college. And one of my first gigs was at Owner's Music Room.
Yeah.
A lot of people may know that. Yeah. And I went in like a New Year's Eve and just sat in and played. And he came up and said, young fella, like, you're pretty good, And he offered me a job right then. So that was kind of my first club professional job on the chitlin circuit. And I just worked that for a while. And things just kind of started expanding from there.
So do you feel like there were any strategic steps that you began to take it from, okay, I'm here, I came and kind of really happened upon a job because you were there playing? Was there ever any like actual, hey, I'm going to be intentional about how I get into this, how I make my moves? Did that ever happen? And what were those things?
So if I can back up a little while, before I left home, I would collect all these VHS tapes of different performances. Yeah.
For people who are too young to know what VHS is.
Right.
Those are videos, but way big. They don't just stream
for
on your
VCR.
Netflix. Yeah, VCRs. Yeah. Google it.
Yeah. So I would watch those like to no end, just like really tear them up, playing them and rewind and playing and rewind, playing and rewind. And what I used to do is I used to pretend to be the guy that's in charge, the guy that was pointing everybody out and do this and do that. Didn't really know what it was called. And so fast forward back to when I started doing this, I was like, okay, I see the positions, I see how everybody works in this and everybody's role. I want to be this person. That person, the job description was a musical director. So from there, I just started kind of researching and talking to different people, and really figured out what it took to do that. And I think the biggest thing, honestly, was networking. And that's a whole nother topic that we can jump into, but that was a big part of it. So I strategically started working with different artists, and they would lend me their ideas, same thing I talked about, and I would do my best to come up with arrangements for their shows and go in the studio. And a lot of our friends, it was just practice. It was on the job practice. And so, yeah, I mean, I can go on and on about it, but that's the kind of the grasp of it.
So essentially you just you looked at what it was all comprised of, and you said, okay,
Hmm.
here is the part that I would like to play in that. And
Right.
then, so did you have any, and I, I try, and I tell everyone this in every conversation, I try to prepare people before we have these conversations, but it is
Yeah,
a conversation. So sorry, I didn't ask you about this question, but
that's fine.
when you figured that out, were there, because again, this is, and my whole purpose to this essentially is that as creatives, a lot of times, and I'm going to say we, because I think you'll appreciate me saying we and not y'all.
You're very creative.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that as creatives, we have a hard time seeing the more direct paths to making it a career in business than when you can just, like in my situation now, you can go get a marketing degree or you can learn certain skills and then apply
Hmm.
them in a particular job or in a particular place. And that's a little harder as a creative. And that's kind of why I'm kind of stuck here in this particular question space. But
Okay.
basically, I wonder, once you figured out, here's the role I want to play, this is what it is, was there anyone, were there any mentors that you kind of had along the way, or people who you felt like, okay, this person might be able to help me get some connections or at least give me some insight as to what's going on? Were there any people like that? And if so, how did you get to those people?
That's where the networking came in. So I basically just put myself in positions. There were several people. Like I mentioned, Mr. Ben Massey. That was an avenue for me to learning the studio side of things. Um, and from watching those tapes, I really, honestly, I just, for a while, I don't want to say faked it, but I really did because I was just learning. It was an on the job training type of situation. So as I would meet people, I would just converse with them and have conversations about this and that, just ask a bunch of questions um, that really kind of set me on that path. And that was everything from um, how to actually put together arrangements and understanding the transitions and the time slots that things go in, how to put together a 60-minute show. So those were just questions that I sat over people's shoulder and and just paid attention as I went along.
So when did
I know
you
I
But
Go ahead.
when did you decide that it was a business for you? Like, so you're doing it, right? You're doing it as work for hire, basically.
Right.
At some point, and you're like, hey, I'm just receiving a check for me and my service and what I'm doing. But what we know now, based on one thing you didn't mention in your introduction, I don't think, maybe I missed it, was that you also, you book bands for people for different events. So
Hmm.
it's like if there is
Hmm.
an event or a festival going on, you'll put the team together, right? The people who are going to play, as well as make sure, they're together to make it amazing. But at what point do you feel like you saw it as, okay, I need to build an actual business around this? I need to get my legal entity, which I know you currently have. Like, when did
Hmm.
that start to enter your mind?
When I realized I wanted to help people.
Mm.
So one of the goals too, one of the companies that I work with is TK Productions in Birmingham. It was really one of my first starts to start playing with artists. And what I would do with them is um, I would reach out to the artists, or they would reach out to the artists. We would book a show, and then from there, the artists would fly in. We would rehearse the whole nine. I did that a couple of times. I was like, okay, so this is an opportunity for me really to help different people. And so what I did was I got a roster of musicians together, and this was still on the job training. I really didn't know. I was asking questions and this and that. But as I started doing it, I said, okay, I can have a roster of bass players in the area because one of the things too, you got the meccas like the New Yorks, the LAs, the Atlantas, and that things. But there are so many talented people in rural areas that don't get an opportunity only because they're not heard. So that's one of the things that really, really drove that to let me create something different with this because I want to be able to not only put myself in a position to have better opportunities, but everybody else around me.
Yeah.
So I think that's when it really shifted for me. And so even right now, I don't have the exact number, but I probably have 30 or 40 musicians that work for me on a regular. Well, obviously before COVID, but you know, and so
Boo.
that's kind of what started for me. I know. And it's been great. but it's been not so great at
Oh,
the
we're going to
same
talk
time.
about that. I know
Oh,
we're going to talk
yes.
about that. But before I get into because 2020 is a whole situation. But before we get into that,
Hmm.
so once you begin to do the kind of legal side of it, because what I imagine is happening, and I don't know this, and tell me if I'm going too far, is that people pay West Unlimited, and then you take care of everybody else, right? It's like you are not necessarily
Yes.
an employer, but you are kind of the entity that's handling that. And I think that's
Yes.
really important to point out to people who are in a creative space, because oftentimes it can be hard to see outside of you just doing the art, right? It's like,
Hmm.
yes, I have this skill and I'm going to do this thing. And yes, people are going to pay me for it. But essentially, I am paying myself as a business, just like I am
Hmm.
paying other people as a business.
Hmm.
And so I wonder, were there ever any kind of hard lessons that you learned once you got into the business side of it and you began bringing other people on and being responsible for that to your clients and to the people who are working with you?
Hmm. I think the responsibility is what the artists want from them is a preparedness. When they come in, is to trust that everybody's ready to go. So that I don't like to babysit. I don't micromanage, but that is one of the things. As far as like paying people, yeah, there are set budgets that we get in place, and I have to make sure that everybody's accounted for because there's so much more than just what we see on stage. Um, and sometimes that goes from hiring sound men, that goes from getting sound, that goes, so it stretches way beyond what you actually see in the on stage production, if you will. Everything from people sending the emails and making sure all this stuff is like all these moving parts are happening behind the scenes, as you know. And so, with the legal part of all that, it is, I won't say it takes care of itself, but it more or less, there's certain properties I guess you have in place to make sure that that happens. So
Curtis Comack says he's so grateful to be one of the bases
mm,
that you can call on. I just wanted to throw that in there because I
that's my guy.
could. So let's talk about 2020 some. Essentially, 2020 is a mess. I'm going to keep
Mm,
my expletives to myself. It's a mess.
hmm.
And so tell me about what challenges that brought, because clearly, before 2020 happened, you were a traveling, touring. You had something that would have been in October on an island that I was hoping I could go to this year. um, you had all of these things across the world that were going on, and then as we got into February, March-ish, the world began to shut down as we know it. So how did that feel, and what happened there?
Mm. It was like a gut punch, honestly, because I traveled home from Baltimore. I think it was like March 13th or 14th. I got home and then everything stopped without warning, without anything. Just we're closing the borders, we're shutting everything down. Everybody stay at home. So before that, I was on the road maybe 3 or 4 days a week, on and off airplanes, a lot. And so that really, I didn't know what to do initially, because when you set your job up or you set your income up to actually have to go out and make money as most people, what do? And this falls back to all the rest of the musicians I've talked about as well. You go from doing 6 or 7 shows a week to nothing at all. It's quite a culture shock, I guess you would say. So there's been a transition in figuring out how to combat 2020, and it's an ongoing challenge, to be totally honest, because right now venues are still not hiring, or putting on shows, and a lot of musicians are still not working. A lot of people just in entertainment period are not working because of that. So it's an ongoing challenge to kind of figure out what to do. And right now, I like to use the term neutralize. Everybody's kind of neutralized. So there are not a lot of moving parts happening around. So I think everything is going online, which is why we're doing this right
Right.
now. One of the reasons a lot of this stuff will be in person, but that's no longer happening. So I think everybody's just trying to figure out how to move forward, and I think the content part is what everybody's driving towards right now.
Yeah. And so have you found that you've had to think about evolving and pivoting for yourself? And have you had any thoughts around how you do that for the clients you're working with? Because I imagine, like I said, you were working with a lot of promoters of events, festivals, and things like that. Have you found any space for yourself in this space to say, hey, this is where I might be of help, or what I can offer?
Yeah. They're trying to figure things out as well. So, we have Zoom meetings here and there trying to figure things out. But until you kind of get the okay that it's even safe, a lot of them can't move forward with what they have to do. As far as me, I always think short game and long game. And I've been trying to create, well, I haven't been trying, I've been creating things for the long game. So there's always quick ways to make money. And then there's things like, okay, well, I have this time. I can now do stuff that I wasn't afforded to do before because of the time. When you're on the road a lot, you don't have all this stuff at your leisure all the time. I carry a laptop, try to get stuff done on the road, but sometimes it can be difficult. So to actually create stuff during this time that I can actually say this will last much longer. Once things, I guess, back to normal or the world opens up, as a lot of my friends like to say, I can have these things set up to where hopefully they're working on their own. So when I do get back to what I'm doing, this stuff can still work for me.
And so in entrepreneur talk, we call that kind of like pricing strategy and levels of having that here's something that's bigger that I can offer, and here are kind of the smaller passive income kind of things that I can do. And I, again, just want to build that bridge for people who are in non-creative spaces, because a lot of times, what we find at Create is that sometimes it's really hard for a creative person to see themselves as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. And they think that some of the principles to starting and growing a business, or taking their art and their skill set, their talent into a space that, pays their mortgage or does all of that, the two things seem so disconnected often. And the truth of the matter is that they're not, though we speak about them kind of in a different language sometimes, saying things like, hey, I'm trying to have some passive income, and also think about how I get back into performing in front of crowds of people, whatever that looks like, whether it's in person or it's in virtual land, whatever this is called.
Right.
And I just want to make sure people kind of, hear that, yes, it takes both things. And I also think that, what you said about having other people that you can refer or put in place, that means you're not always doing the work. And that's something that a lot of creative entrepreneurs have a hard time with too. We feel like it has to be me because I have the skill. It's like, no, I know other people who play. It does not have to be me. Right? It can be someone else, and being able to create the structure to do that. And so, but you do, let me not assume, you do use other keyboard players, piano players.
Absolutely. And that's funny, because when I called them, they're like, you're calling me? I'm like, yeah, because, after you've done something for a period of time, I want to train other people. To also do it. And that's one of my biggest things, is giving other people an opportunity, whether it's keyboard players or bass players or drummers. Everybody starts somewhere, and somebody took a chance on me. And I feel like I have to just pay that forward. And that is the biggest thing with that.
Yeah. So, which is really important, because otherwise, how would people, like you said, get the opportunity? Especially since people think that when you're from Selma, Alabama, you get no opportunities. So here is a question that I have, just that's kind of more on my side of the screen here with organizations like Create Birmingham and really all the entities that exist outside of the art, right? So you know that there are artists and there are musicians and there are production people and sound people and all of that. But it takes people supporting the art in order for it to have the economic impact that we'd like to see. So what does support look like for someone who is a musician, like by trade? This is what I do. What does support look like? Let's start simple with friends and family. How best does support look from friends, family, those who are close to you?
I think it starts young,
Mm.
and even letting them know that it's affordable, that it, that they can do it. I saw, and this is kind of off script a little bit, but I saw a documentary the other day on Stephon Marbury, and at the end of this documentary, he was in a barbershop with a little boy, and he's asking the little boy what he wants to be. He said a basketball player, and he looked him dead in his eyes and he said, "You can be the president of the United States." And the little boy said, he said, "Nobody never told me that." He said, "I know." And that moment to me was like, okay, it starts there. That's the support that I think that is needed from family and friends. Because a lot of people's family and friends like mine are not in the business. So they don't really know how to help me from the business side of things, but the actual support of letting me know that you can do this. And you got to put in the time, you got to put in the work, and we're going to help you maybe by providing resources, whatever we can, send you to camps, or it's places like the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame that I found when I got to Birmingham, and they did summer camps. They provided instruments for kids, the whole nine. I played saxophone for a long time. I started in the sixth grade, I think it was.
I don't think I knew
or
that.
seventh. A
I
lot
feel
of
like
people
suddenly
don't
I
know
don't know
that.
you anymore. Really?
Well, a lot of people don't know. Yeah, I did, and it was a great experience for me, because I started playing piano when I was 5. But to be that is kind of playing the piano at a young age is kind of like golf. It's like something you have to do on your own. But playing in a band once you get to middle school and high school is more like a team game.
Huh.
So it was a great experience for me. So I always encourage people to find programs or start programs that actually puts instruments in kids' hands, and let them actually play it and test them out. Let them actually bang on the drum, let them feel the vibrations of the instruments and see that they connect to it, because everybody won't. But if you never ever actually can put your hands on one, you never know. And so I think that is very important for certain organizations and schools to keep the music programs and all the arts programs open and available to students so that they even know that these are possibilities. So,
Yeah, and that's something that, of course, I get to see firsthand, working with Create Birmingham and just really finding the different ways to shed light on, arts and what's happening, because essentially, productions and things like that are going to happen. But I think the
mhm,
appeal sometimes of people seeing them as real jobs,
right.
is can be this tug of war. But I think, the more support that we can give to people who are brave enough to share their talents, their
Mhm,
creations essentially, with the world, it's really, really important. And so what you kind of got into the other side of that question, which is what can organizations do, when you were talking
mhm,
about just continuing to make sure that there are programs available. Um,
right.
Anything else you feel like organizations can do, or even in the industry itself? Is there anything you feel like the music industry could do to better support those who are working to get into it and be successful in it?
Um, I've been in the industry for a few years, but I always talk to mentors and people much older than me that saw the industry change. I would say pay people what they're worth. Creating music is
I
not
need an
something.
applause.
Oh man,
I need applause
that
right there.
that is huge. Pay
Yeah.
people what they're worth. You know, the streaming service and everything now. I know a lot of people, great artists and musicians, who don't even want to put out music because they don't feel like that it'll be valued.
Yeah.
To work hard and spend thousands of dollars and several hundred hours, from creating, sitting down and just coming up with an idea, to then forming that, then sending it to someone to mix and sending it to master, and then doing packaging or whatever else. All that is a process that take months, sometimes years for people. And to get pennies on the dollar in return, it is something that's like, it's heartbreaking, you
Yeah.
know. But there was a time, like I said, which is why I talked to the older guys, um, and I had a conversation once with Chick Corea, and one thing that I always remember that he said to me during that conversation was, "Your generation has to get on the road." You guys have to burn up the road and get out there and make the money that way. Because right now, album sales and streaming, you guys are gonna starve. And that's one thing that I've taken to heart when he said that. And so, side note, back to COVID, when you don't even have that entity, what do? So you can't make um,
That's a lot.
good money, I would say,
Yeah.
by putting your music out there, and then when you can't go out and even have live shows, what do you do as a musician entrepreneur? So you have to be creative and find new ways to do that. So
Yeah, and it
yeah.
also speaks to because I think a lot of people, just because I have experience in music industry, I know that there are performance royalty organizations and just a lot of people who are fighting for getting paid more from streaming services and because I think a lot of times, the masses and the rest of the world see, oh, well, they put it out, they're rich now. Okay, no, actually, I'm the same. Whatever I had yesterday before it came out is likely what I have today once it has, hit the world or whatever you see that as. But people still kind of carry that old school, you put an album out and now people are rushing to the store to buy it off the shelf mentality about music release. And that's not really how it happens. And it hasn't for a while. And so I think that, there are government type things too, that people, when you think about all the people who lobby for different things, there are a lot of people who have to fight for musicians and creators to get paid hardly anything, from spins and streams, and then that's a whole thing with charting and all this other kind of craziness. But you're right. I think that musicians do have to find, especially now, ways in all arts to be creative. Because even if I were painting something, I can no longer necessarily just invite people into a space to view my paintings, right?
Right.
And so it's
you don't have a platform.
Yeah, it's become increasingly difficult, which may be more money, right, on top of producing and paying for production and mastering and whatever else you might need. And so, 2020, how we loathe you. Anyway, so
I think we're gonna be here a while too. So I want to encourage people.
Wait,
I want to encourage.
Look at me. Say it again one more time. We're gonna be here for how long?
Oh wow.
Okay.
I don't have the answer, but we're gonna be in this 2020 kind of thing for a while, you know. So I encourage everybody to really kind of rethink what you're doing, because even when we get to the other side of this, whenever that is, it could be 2 years, it could be 3 years before things are somewhat back to a normality. You gotta have to rethink things, because they still won't be what we knew before then. You know what I mean? We're living in a very historic time right now. 100 years from now, this period is going to be like the 1918 that we talk about all the time.
Right.
So everybody's going to have to rethink everything, and it's going to be interesting to see.
Yes, it is. So do you, speaking of, because, when I talk to our director of programs, we talk about what normal means all the time. And I think that, embracing that going back to normal is not a real thing. It's like we are creating a new normal based on what's happening. And that's important for people to understand, because as long as you have, and especially as creatives, as long as you have this thought that I'm just on wait until it comes back, it's like, but what if it doesn't ever come back the way it used to be, and you've spent time just waiting? Or money even just waiting, instead of trying to figure out, evolve, or otherwise
progress. Right.
So what thoughts do you have for, and I'm going to put this in a couple different perspectives. What advice or what would you say to creatives of all kind, musicians, otherwise, of any type of art, creative entrepreneurs, about getting started? Like when you're first deciding, you know what, I am going to do this, I'm going to go after it. At that point in the journey, what is your advice for them? Yeah, I know.
Sound so simple. It's gonna sound so simple, but honestly, just do it and ask for help in doing it, because that's what I've had to do. I'm not used to the digital thing. I'm young, but I'm an old soul at heart. Like I get out there and get it. You know what I mean? And that's been my thing. You know what I'm saying? I've never done kind of the whole behind the scenes, you know, setting stuff up myself. So I say just get started, write your ideas down, and map them out. You know, really see the end, and then work your way backwards to the beginning. That's how I was taught. You know, to see the end first, and then work yourself backwards, and then just go do it. Something you like to say, you're gonna fail. You know, one of my things. Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. And it's perspective too. It's perspective in what failing is. And usually failing means that you have a high expectation for something and it doesn't quite hit that mark. You know, it's not an actual fail a lot of times. You know what I mean? That's something I'm learning. I've shared stuff, you know, that's gotten 10,000 views or 15, and I share stuff that's gotten 200 in the beginning. And it's like, you know, that can be discouraging, but you just got to keep, you know, keep throttling through, you know, and really, really be sure of your ideas and be sure of what it is, and find a creative way to make it happen. And I think it's so many examples out there.
Yeah.
I mean, YouTube has everything.
All the things.
You know what I mean? So I mean, just do your research. There's so much stuff out there. It's kind of no excuse at this point. You know, everything that I'm preparing to do now, I've been researching for a month, 2 months. So write the ideas down, just get started. You know, share it with your friends and stuff like that.
Oh, share it. A lot of people have a hard time sharing their ideas for
me. Well, that's what I mean. Like if you share it with people that you trust and get positive feedback, you know how to make the necessary adjustments before you broadcast it to the world.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
I just get on Facebook and say, I'm going to put an album out. That's what I do. Because I know it's not a real thing.
But you got the experience, though. You're an incredible writer. You're an incredible singer. I remember your group. And now, no, we are because that's part of this, too. That's how we know each other. You know, for people that don't know, it's from the music scene. And what you did on the music scene, I was quite impressed with, you know. So.
Oh, I have you on record now saying you were impressed with me. Just know I will be replaying.
You already knew that.
Cutting it down to a clip and sending it to you in a text message every time I feel like I need to hear it. So thank you for that. And thank you, Erica, for this comment saying that all those words are true.
Very true.
You know, you spoke a little bit about going forward. I know one of the things that as small business owners and entrepreneurs on that side of things, a lot of people run into kind of a perfection paralysis. Is there any advice you would give for people who feel like, oh, well, I'm waiting until I have all the things in place? You are that person. Okay, what would you say to yourself? In that space, because I'm the same. I am the exact same way, and I think you know this about me. But I'm the same way. I'm like, oh no, I need A, B, and C before I can do D. So, what would you say to those creatives who have a bit of a perfection paralysis about going forward?
So I'm not going to speak to them. I'm going to speak to myself.
Okay, well,
stop procrastinating. Stop procrastinating and just get it done. Stop procrastinating and just get it done.
I think you're talking to me too.
Yeah. I mean it's not brain surgery. It's not rocket science, and I'm learning that. You know, everything that I've ever set out to do, that I just kind of jumped off the cliff, I eventually started gliding, and I know that, and I still have that complex of I gotta have which I like that too though. Because I like stuff to be right. I like a presentation. You know, once you start in productions, and you know, I did TV for a minute as well. And once you start doing that, it's like, okay, you understand how things should be lined up. You know, and so you always want that, but that's not always possible or capable. So just stop procrastinating and start.
I shouldn't ask that question because now I feel attacked.
Hey, I'm attacking myself.
I know, right? So, you know, when we had spoke earlier about, and of course, if anyone, and I always pause to say this, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments and I will put them up on screen and ask those questions out loud. in the meantime, I'll keep running my mouth until our time is up. But you had mentioned earlier about just how organizations and different entities kind of play a role in supporting people understanding that creative industry is a real thing. Like, you know, pay us what we're worth, just like you would pay someone to fix your air conditioner. You know, it feels like, oh, I'm getting something, I'm getting cool air. It's like, well, when I give you entertainment, I'm giving you something as well. When I share art with you, I'm giving you something as well. And I know that that's a hard thing for people to understand. And it can be very discouraging. And so what is your word of encouragement for people who feel like, you know what, I am putting in the work, I am trying to do what I can with what I have, but I don't feel like I'm getting that support from organizations or from the industry, even, you know, people who've gone before me who don't want to share, who don't want to give me information, friends and family who say, well, that's not a real job anyway. Is there any bit of encouragement that you would give to those people who are out there maybe watching and thinking, that all sounds good, but that's not my life?
Find a new circle.
Woo-hoo. All right. I didn't see that.
I think it's that simple.
I think you're right.
Yeah. It's almost like using the analogy of beating a dead horse. Some people just never see it, you know, and some people just don't. So if you change your circle, there are a lot of people out there that's trying to get it. You know, we usually shop to people that we know.
Right.
You know, that's always the thing. We have this perimeter, but it's here. The perimeter is really here, but in our mind we see, okay, I know these people, I got these particular people. You can hashtag something on Instagram and it goes out to all over the world. And I've had people that reach out to me from everywhere, and I've collabed with people like that way, and find out new things about them. You know, do the research and find a new circle of people. Might not be the answer that you thought, but to me, that's real.
Well, you know, it's not, but it's such a truth, because, and sometimes even that's a scary thing. Because again, we have to remember that when it's my art, it's very personal, right? It's very emotional. It's very personal. I've created a thing that I have to seek the world for validation. And so much that they will value it at the price tag that I put on it, which is like levels of risk, emotional risk, to try to take on. But, you know, I don't know that the reason why that feels so strong is because I don't think that a lot of times creatives remember that is an option. You know, it's cool to keep your friends that you've had around and, you know, tell your family, but if you get enough discouraging things, tell somebody else. You know,
even not just discouraging things. Like I said earlier, like it's certain stuff that people around you probably just don't know.
Right.
You know, and so in order to find that, you're going to have to step out of the people that you're around, which may be a great circle of people. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying you may need to get something from somewhere else. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean by that.
Kick them out. I'll say it the way you want to say it. Kick them out.
It's important though. Energy around you is very important for you to continue to vibrate higher.
Yeah.
I learned that along this journey.
How'd you learn that? What was there? Was there a bad thing that have you ever run into someone who told you that, hey, this is not going to work?
Nah. If they did, I didn't hear them.
Well, of course you didn't. You're West Byrd. Nobody would ever say such things.
No, I mean, it's just, I don't really carry the weight of other people. I have visions, I have thoughts, and almost everything that I say that I want to do eventually comes to pass, you know. And it just does, you know what I mean? So, no.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, hey, I'm not mad at it. I'm jealous a little bit, but I'm not mad at it. All right.
You're not.
So, a little bit. So, as we prepare to wrap up, again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it. But while I wait for that, please make sure you go to westunlimited.net. You can see all the things, get all the connections to all the social media things. I'm pretty sure those things are on there. As I went and looked, if you want to have a link to, and so the Billboard chart topping song that you have out right now is with Kim Scott, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's called Free to Be. Yes, the title track from her record.
Come on, Alabama, stand up. All right.
Yeah.
So glad to see that that is happening. So make sure
Thank
you
you.
check that out. Also, we do remind you always to go to createbirmingham.org to see what other events we have going on, conversations, and just know that a lot of the work that we do is for creatives, because a lot of times we have the idea, we have the passion, we have everything we need, but sometimes we do have a hard time turning that into a business, turning that into something that will, you know, will pay our bills. Essentially, we think we're paying them when we gig, but there's so much more you can do,
Yeah.
unless you plan on charging a whole lot. But that brings us to a question we have from Bernard Buggs here. Ask, what's your method to determine your worth?
That's a great question.
Yes, it is.
I think you determine it on the market value
Mm.
of those around you, and that goes with, once again, circles of people that you're around. I was watching a podcast the other day, and a good friend of mine, Sebastian Cole, was on there, and he was like, "You don't really want to know what I charge," and I was like, "Well, maybe they do, but in the circle of people that he's in now, you know." The numbers are a little bit higher, and in this particular business, you're working with labels, sometimes you're working with independent artists, and so that can actually bring in what you're worth. When you're working with organizations, obviously they have a little bit more capital. When you're working with independent artists, sometimes they don't have a budget. It's coming out of their pocket. They may have a little bit something there, but I think that's also how you build relationship with people as well. So that's a deep answer. There's a lot of ways that you can approach that. But
Yeah,
I think once you put the time in, and you're in a circle of people, I think I don't say it's understood what the worth is, but there's a market value, almost in anything that you do. Whether that's a doctor, whether that's a lawyer, there's a market value, and I think you base yourself in that market value.
I think too that, and you kind of spoke to this a little bit, but, and again, this is really very much the same thing that even as a marketer, I run into in trying to value my time, right?
Right.
When you are selling something that you are doing yourself, you're essentially selling time. And because you cannot make more time, you have to eventually take that price up. And that's something that I actually had a light bulb moment of a lifetime while going through the co-starters program with Create Birmingham, that really changed the trajectory of my business about pricing in general. But I think too, when it comes to, like you said, you have to kind of decide for yourself and kind of look around and build relationships. But I think that sometimes you have to decide, is there something else that's as good as money to me where I am right now? So, people always try to hang exposure over your head, which can be very not fun for paying you. But if there is some level of exposure that means, hey, this is going to lead to something else, then maybe you might be willing to do that. But you have to decide that for yourself and not let people just throw that up in your face and you go, oh, well, I guess. It's like, no, if it is this level, then sure, I'm willing to bend on my pricing. But if it's not, exposure is not enough.
Let me be very clear too, because that's important what you just said. I did a lot of stuff for free. I did a lot of stuff for free.
Look at me. Yeah, you did. I know you did.
Yeah, and it was in good faith. But that led to other stuff.
Right.
It helped me build my resume. And once people start calling you.
Yeah. We have another question from another music great. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Eric Essex. He asked, are other artists that you work with making the pivot to virtual performances until they can get back to playing for live audiences? So for your circle of friends or the people that do you know that they are making that pivot as well?
Yeah, there are a lot of them who have picked up, I guess, a forum, and they're using their social media platform as a platform to broadcast. They've come up with different ideas for shows. I know, like Rick Braun has created this massive production at his house which a lot of people may not be afforded to do. But yeah, I think a lot of them are taking this opportunity to try to create something else. So yes.
And Eric, if you want to tell us what you're doing, what I'm saying, just
exactly
drop it in the comments, Eric. We share around here. It's okay for you to tell us what you have going on as well. Which maybe, we need to talk to you up here in these screens. So, okay, if there are not any questions, I know there is a lag or delay that oftentimes kind of happens with this in general, but let me just get ready to wrap up and say thank you very, very, very much for your openness and willing to share your journey and kind of how you have evolved this from young men in Selma seeing Fred Hammond to worldwide musical director and NASCAR opener. All the things. I'm super proud of you. In case
Thank you so much.
People who have come to multiple conversations can tell when I'm talking to my real friends, I think. And I'm just so very, very proud of where you have come and how you are continuing to be a great example to people who are, there's a question here, are often, not knowing which way to go. Let's get this question from Curtis Comack. What is an approach to network and build a relationship with someone who is or are where you want to be?
What is the approach to networking?
Yeah, like how do you reach out to these people who you want to be when you grow up, or their circle, or
it's funny. I've reached out to people and got no response before, but I kind of put it in the atmosphere. Okay, one day I'm going to work with this person, or one day I'm going to do this, and I kind of sometimes I leave it alone, and then somewhere along the journey we meet, and it happens. But I think at this point, you got to use your social media platforms, but the thing with networking is also they want to see something. They want to be able to tangibly say, okay, this person is valuable to me because of this. Because if you get 1,000 requests for whatever it is from a networking perspective, you're not going to answer 1,000 people. Right. Most people just don't have the patience or the time for that. So in approaching these people, I say have something that they can see your work. They can see why you're valuable to connect with. So I think that's important for networking.
That is a really, really good point, which requires that you kind of have your own life together, at least to the extent that you can. Because I think sometimes when you say have your life together, people are like, oh, well, if I had it together, I wouldn't need the network. And it's like, no, not be perfect. That's not a real thing. But you at least need to be in motion. People can't get on your bandwagon if it's just sitting still, then all y'all are sitting still together. No one wants to do that. So that's a really good thing. Have your little bit together, reach out to who you want to. And do you think there's anything to say to people who are fearful to reaching out to certain levels of people? Should they not? Should they try for someone who appears more accessible?
Yeah. I'm going to say this, but I'm at a place now, I don't feel like anybody's not accessible. Anybody. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's because of the place I am now. And that doesn't mean it will be easy to just access, but you just have to know, like, I got something to offer.
Right.
I have something to offer to this person. So going to them with a purpose, and something that actually not like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Da, da, da. That's not networking, it's a start, but it's not networking. So, I mean, if you're fearful, that's something that you have to dig down within yourself and build a confidence to know that, okay, I'm going after this for this particular reason. I want to connect with this person because I want this XYZ to happen. So it's a personality thing, don't be weird.
Well,
I mean,
honestly, that's the same way it works. If you take that same question and that same answer into take it to a banking setting or a marketing
setting.
That's what I mean. The exact same thing. If I know that, I remember when Bozoma St. John did Sloss Tech, I think 1 year, and I had just recently understood who she was, and I did not realize how much I was supposed to be fangirling over her because I didn't know enough about her. But it's like, if I see her, here are the things I am going to say. I need you to know this is who I am. I need to have my elevator pitch together or whatever, because I need you to know that not only do I know you and what value you have, but I know myself. And like you said, what value I have and why you need that value in your life, just like I need what you have in my life. And I think it's really important, and it stands out. I think it makes you look different than every other ask.
Exactly.
Said, and that's really, really good call out. And it applies in all spaces, and that's kind of what I have to get people to understand. It is not as different as we think. All right. Well, I don't have any other questions that I see here that are just kind of hanging. Do you have any last words or thoughts to the world before we go?
I just want to thank you for having me, first of all. It's an honor to be here and talking with you. I think this was a great conversation. Hopefully it was helpful to anyone out there. You can find me on all the social media platforms. Facebook is West Byrd. Instagram is West Unlimited. Twitter is West Unlimited. And my website, www.westunlimited.net. I always get back to people. If you have any questions, anything, want to do some music, whatever, reach out to me and let's connect.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us for another Community Conversations. And thank you so much to you, West Byrd, for being here and giving me some of the precious, precious time that you have right now. So goodbye, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Peace.